Success, it has been said, is not the absence of failure, but going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. My name is BJ Gremillion, and I am the host of the Rush to Fail podcast. This podcast was created to highlight and learn from others who have turned their failures into success in hopes that it will both inspire and encourage others to push through their trials and to not be afraid of short-term failure. Our mantra on this show is to fail often, fail forward, and rush to fail. Welcome to the Rush to Fail podcast. I'm your host, BJ Gremillion. Today we have Christi Davis with us, and Christi is, it's funny, we were talking about this beforehand. We have ties that go way back. In fact, I know her dad about a decade ago started working with him on some real estate transactions, and so love him to death. And then it just so happened in Gilbert, Arizona, our paths crossed, and my wife ended up, or no, actually it was our kid.
Yeah, before that, it was our James. Kids were friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he wanted to hang out. And so we're like, sure, who is this person you want to hang out with, you know? And so anyways, we met that way and then started getting to know, Christi and her family more and more. And then I think my wife found out that you did coaching. So Christi is a life coach, and she helps families that are entering that phase of the scary phase of young adults and teenagers and all that fun stuff, because she has 7 kids. And so Christi has,
lots of trial and
7
error.
kids, 2 girls, 5 boys, and 4 grandkids, which I just learned as well.
That's right.
You have your hands full, and I'm so excited to dive into all the things about parenting and what you've learned and the failures and the excitement and the downside. Like, I don't know, it's a package of emotions when you are a parent to just one child, let alone 7.
Multiply that. Yep.
So anyway, Thank you for joining the show, Christi.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. And I have to tell you, I've had it's been a funny experience, like preparing myself mentally for this, because when I learned the name of your podcast, Rush to Fail, I was like, oh no, I don't really have any experiences with failure, which is funny because I'm not like super successful at anything,
Yeah.
And so I'm like, why is that? Why do I feel like I don't have failure stories? And it's because I don't really think that failure is a thing. Like,
love it.
And so I just haven't internalized the experiences that I've had as failures, even though someone from the outside might look at my life and think it's chock full of failures. They just don't feel that way to me. So it's been a funny realization.
That is why you're a life coach, because you're an eternal optimist. You're able to turn all of your experiences, whether they're good or bad, into just learning experiences. And to your point, I love that, because the name failure, or the word failure, I should say, like that comes across harshly, right? Like it comes across as like a negative thing.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is just eliminate that whole idea that, oh man, I'm such a failure, I'm making so many mistakes. It's like, no, hurry up. And at least in my experience, I don't learn unless I make all of those mistakes. I don't just do it the right way the first time ever.
Right.
It's always like I stumble kind of into it. And so I'm sure that you have had a lot of experiences with 7 kids, going through those experiences of like the roller coaster of emotions, where you're like, okay, next time I'm going to do it differently. And
for sure.
And so I'm very curious, actually. Okay. But before we get into that, I want to know a little bit more about so tell us about who Christi Davis was before she got married and had all these kids.
Okay. Gosh, that was a long time ago. Yeah. So I was born and raised in Arizona. I was the oldest of 7 kids. So 7 kids didn't feel like a huge stretch to me. I graduated from BYU with a degree in music. I served a mission for my church in Washington State. I was called Spanish speaking, but never really learned how to speak Spanish somehow.
Really?
I mean, I speak it okay, but it's not the same as if I were to live in Mexico for a year and a half,
Right. Yeah.
So did that. I got married right before I graduated. Well, about a year before I graduated from college, and I had a baby right before I graduated. And so just graduating felt like the hugest accomplishment ever. Mm-hmm. And then we moved right after my husband graduated. We moved to Arizona and bought a house and got started raising kids. And that's what I did for a long, long time until 2018, which is the first time I ever felt free enough in my own life to do something in addition to raising kids. So that's when I went and got certified as a life coach. And I've been running my own business for the last 5-6 years doing that. So,
Awesome. What is your mom's name, by the way?
Ginny.
Jenny?
Like Ginny.
Ginny.
Yeah. Virginia.
Okay. Yeah. Your mom and dad are some of the greatest people. So I don't know. I've met your mom, I think, once, but obviously worked quite a bit with your dad, and they
Yeah.
are seriously like salt of the earth, best people
They
you will
really
ever meet.
are.
They, yeah, like,
And I
and
didn't
so you had some
realize how
great coaching.
lucky I was until even recently. I continued to uncover things that I'm like, wow, I got that from my parents. And I didn't even know I was being taught that. Like, as I was thinking about, like, why am I not afraid of failure? Why do I not internalize failure? And I thought back to when I was in junior high and I was a bit of a perfectionist and I wanted straight A's and I was stressing myself out doing homework all the time. And my dad came to me and said, hey, if I see straight A's on your next report card, you are in big trouble. Like,
I
he like
love that.
commanded me to take it easy and get some B's. And I think that was really influential. Like, that changed the way I thought about perfection from a young age.
I wish I had that problem with our kids.
Yeah, me too.
We don't have that issue in
I
our
do not
house.
have that issue with my kids either.
They know kind of right off the bat. They're like, C's get degrees, so we're
Yep.
cool as long as we pass, get
I'm
to the
just,
next
yeah, I'm
grade.
begging for passing grades. Like, come on, turn in an
Seriously.
assignment or
An
two
F.
and you'll pass.
Yeah. That is so cool, though. I love that story, though. And that totally, I'm not surprised at all that he would say something like that.
Yeah,
But that's cool, though. I mean, it takes the edge off of the whole perfection mentality
totally.
and, yeah, get you in the right mindset. So something that you said, I guess, struck a nerve with me because in 2018, you mentioned that you finally got to a point where you're like, okay, I'm going to do something for myself. Like, being a mom is incredibly selfless and not a job that you get many thanks really at all from your kids. If anything, it's always the latter, and it's always, what you're doing wrong or what you could do better. So it's a tough gig. Like, I don't think people realize how hard it
It is a
is,
tough gig.
especially people with that many kids.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how did you come to like the point where you like, okay, I got to do this. Like, I need to start my own thing and do my own business. Like, how did that evolve?
Well, so I've always been a little bit interested in business. Like, I've always kind of watched my dad and some of my brother-in-laws and I've watched their business ventures and I've listened to them talk about it and kind of put my 2 cents in. It's always been interesting to me. I'm very driven by what God wants me to do. Like, that's always number one priority in my life. And so many times over the years, I would pray about, okay, I have this business idea. What do you think about this? Can I go start this business? Can I try this? And I always felt really strongly like God wanted my full attention in my home on these kids. And I was always like, okay, yeah, you're probably right. I'll stick with this. I'll put this off until later. And then 2018, my youngest started kindergarten, and I just kept thinking about life coaching. I knew someone who was a life coach, and I was always like, yeah, that just feels like the right thing for me to do. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna like maybe next year when he's in school full time, I think I'm gonna do that. Is that okay with you, God? And he was like, actually, right now, I want you to go do it right now. There's this training that starts next month. And so I was like, oh, what? Really? Okay, great. So I looked into it and it was $20,000 to get certified at the school where I wanted to go. And I was like, what the heck? Well, that's not my budget. Maybe someday. And I just kept feeling like it would not leave me alone. Like, no, this is what I want you to do and do it now. So we found a way. We scraped up the money and I just did it. And yeah, and it has been the best thing ever. My
That
husband
is
said
crazy.
pretty early on, my husband's like, I hope you do make that money back, which I did in the first year, but it was, a little scary at the time. But he said, even if you never make that money back, like, it was the best money we ever spent because of the things you're learning and teaching me and teaching our kids. And so,
Wow.
It's
it's
been
such
great.
an interesting thing. I remember like I don't even know when life coaching became a thing. I just remember being like, "What? Like life coach? Like I don't even know." And someone I think wanted to rent out one of our office spaces. I think that was the first time I heard of it, and it was probably around that time. And I was like, "What in the world is a life coach? Like,
Yeah.
and who gets to say that they're a life coach?" So maybe educate me. What is a
Yeah.
life coach, and like how does that degree work, and what is it?
So the funny thing is, probably 15 years ago, I mean, so long ago, my sister and I decided we wanted to write a book together. And we never got further than the forward. She wrote the
Yeah.
forward about what this book was going to be about. And in it, she said, Christi is a successful life coach. And I'm like, that would be cool. I wonder what I wonder what a successful life coach even is. Like, I didn't think much about it, but it was just like nagging in the back of my mind, you know?
Mhm.
So I started listening to a podcast that was done by a life coach. And so that's kind of how I got to know it. I found Jody Moore, and then I found where she was certified, which was the Life Coach School. Honestly, it's not a government regulated industry, so anyone can call themselves a life coach,
Mm,
which is kind of why you want to be careful, I think, and do a little bit of due diligence before you hire a life coach, because anybody can just say they're a life coach. I didn't
right.
feel comfortable doing that. I wanted some training, and so I looked around and found what to me felt like the school that aligned with my what I wanted to do and kind of my own ideas anyway. And that was a life coach school. So I got certified. It took about 6 months back then. I did a 6-day in-person training, and then we did like weekly calls and then monthly calls, and we had to submit our work and get reviewed and things like that. So that's the way mine worked. There are programs ranging from free online programs to $20,000 in-person program. There's just a really wide variety. So you want to do
So
your own
interesting.
research.
Yeah, and it all I can say is it's kind of like proof is in the pudding, right? And so like I still don't know a whole lot about life coaching and all that, but I have worked with a life coach before. My wife has worked with you,
Mm-hmm.
and her it's so funny because when we moved, she's missing all of her friends in Arizona, and it was a difficult move obviously to leave all
Yeah.
that, but it's funny. She just kept saying, I just need to talk to Christy. Like, I just feel like if I can get back into doing like that coaching,
Yeah.
and it's so funny to your husband's point. Like, I don't think I realized or had the correlation, to realize like, you know what? I think you were like a little bit happier when you were meeting with her because I think life just made a little bit more sense and you could
Yeah.
compartmentalize a little bit better and you could just, I don't know, she could just process stuff a little bit better. And it's interesting because it's like sometimes you don't realize something until it's not there. And so now
Exactly.
she's like, hey,
She's
there was
missing it.
something there. Yeah, like I need to go back to
Yeah.
that.
I've been
And so
working
that's
with a
very cool.
life coach. When we were during certification, we got paired up, and I got paired up with this lady that I just really love. And I've been working with her now since 2018, every other week. And for me, it's like going to the gym only for your brain, for your mind, and for your emotions. It's just like
Hmm.
regular maintenance that helps me stay in better emotional health.
Yeah, like I'm very curious. Like, how does it work? What's the psychology? Because I it's funny. I always make fun of I joke with my wife because I graduated with a degree in psychology. So I tell her I'm this psychologist, and so I have like the authority, which is totally a joke. We
Yeah, I
all
bet
know
she
who
loves
wears the
that.
pants, who runs the house. Like, it's a complete joke. We all get that. But anyways, I'm curious though. I'm always fascinated with like how does it work? Why is it so effective? And what are some things that you do, I guess, to help it be effective in helping, I guess, elicit change in people's lives?
So I think there's two major answers to that. One is just having the time set aside, either weekly or every other week or monthly or whatever you choose to do, having the time set aside to address your mental health and to pay
Mhm.
attention to it. I think that in and of itself is huge. Like, I am going to think about how I think. I'm going to make sure I'm being intentional in my life. So just having that set appointment to dedicate to that, I think, is hugely helpful. My specialty and really the focus of the life coach school where I was trained, it's on mindset work and on choosing, without like going into too much boring detail, it's choosing how you want to think about things and choosing how you want to feel about life and what do you want to create in your life, because really we have more power than we think we do to create the kind of life we want to live. It just
Mm,
it just requires being intentional. So I just really help my clients see what their current thinking is causing or creating in their lives, and then help them see what the other options are so they can
mm.
better choose.
Interesting. Okay, so have you noticed, like in your career, does it help more to meet with people like once a week, every other week, once a month? Like, is there a sweet spot?
In the beginning, I find it's really helpful every week because
Mm,
it's like when you're learning to drive. It's a skill that requires all of your attention and focus, you know? You have to like
mhm,
keep your hands on 10 and 2. You can't listen to music. It requires a lot of
mhm,
attention. And so I think it's helpful to meet every week in the beginning, and then as you get more comfortable, like I have a client that I've been meeting with for like since 2018 at once a
mhm.
month, and she does great with once a month. It's just her regular maintenance. She keeps a running list of things she wants to talk about when we're together. So I think that works great for her. So kind of depends on, sometimes I'll have people that I meet with once a month and then they're going through something really hard and they want to meet more often again.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
No, that's so interesting. So, have you noticed a difference with it being like one on one in person versus remote, like Zoom?
oh,
Do you notice a difference?
I love one-on-one. Like I
Yeah.
love when people come to my office. It's just fun. But
Hmm.
Zoom was awkward for me at first, but I've totally gotten used to it.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of people who are like, no, I only want to do in person. I want to come to you, which is great. But
Yeah.
then, I've had clients in Hawaii and Denmark and like New York, all over the place. So I love that Zoom makes that possible. It's just
Yeah.
such a cool world we live in.
Yeah, it really is. That's so cool. Okay. So I'm curious now, when people come to you, and maybe you can, yeah, like help us understand like who, it sounds like your avatar or your like the perfect client that you go after is moms that are
Hmm.
going into that phase of they have kids that are going into adolescence and or dealing with, maybe a little bit older kids and the issues and trials that come up and that we all know accompany that phase of life. And so is that right? Like, is that kind of like what you're focused on
Yeah,
or?
definitely. Actually, I find a lot of times they're moms who, a lot of them that seem to be drawn to me are Christian. A
Yeah.
lot of them are members of my same church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And
Mhm.
a lot of them actually have already been through a teenager or two, and everything was like okay. Like, yeah, there's the rocky teenage years, but then this second or this third or sometimes this fourth kid comes along and they're like, what the heck? This is like
Mhm.
nothing I've ever dealt with before. What I've been doing isn't working, and they're just at a loss. And
Mm.
that's really who I love to help because that
Yeah.
was me. My first two kids kind of went with the program for the most part. And then I had this third kid that came along and like, I have no idea where he's coming from. We didn't think anything alike. He pushed back on every single boundary I ever tried to set. And he just
Mhm.
really caused me to completely change the way I looked at the world and the way I looked at parenting and what my job was as a parent. And at the time, it was so frustrating, and now I am so grateful for him because he really made me change for the better.
Wow. How did that process occur? Like, how did you, I guess, come to appreciate it? Because it's so funny. I was the fourth child. There's 8 kids in my family, and I was number four. But I was that number three, I'm sure, for my
Oh
mom,
yeah.
who was like, holy smokes, I had these girls and they all listened to me and they were great. And then I had this boy and he's like completely, yeah, independent and difficult.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure she could have used you as help. But
Yeah, I could have used someone at that stage in my life,
yeah,
honestly.
like how did you get through it? And how did you come to that realization so you were able to turn it around and be like, hey, this was actually a blessing?
Well, so this is kind of the origin story I tell where I knew that
Hmm.
something had to change was, so he was 15 and he was going through this stage where he was sneaking out all of the time. Like he was just never home in the middle of the night. Sometimes
Hmm.
we would catch him, a lot of the time we didn't. But we needed to sleep at night. We couldn't just stand guard outside of his room. I tried like taping the doors, I tried setting booby traps, all the things, trying to control him and stop him from sneaking out because I thought that's what a good mom did, right?
Yeah.
She makes
Hmm.
sure her kids are safe and home at night and following the rules. And So I had tried everything I could think of with this kid. And I finally was in frustration one time. I was like, what do I have to do? Like, put a surveillance camera in your room? And he gets this funny smirk on his face. And he's like, that would be a really fun challenge. Yeah, let's do that. And I was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And
That's
so
so
that's when I realized, oh,
funny.
I actually cannot control this kid. I can't. He was
Uh,
6'4", way faster than me, right? I cannot control him. And so I was like, well, then what is my job here? I need to
yeah.
figure out what my role is as his mother. If I can't keep him safe and I can't make sure he makes good choices, then what is my job?
Mhm.
And that just began a real journey of learning to let go and embrace the fact that he is responsible for his own life.
Mhm.
So, and now I have a 15-year-old that I handle so much better. Like, we work together as a team. He's every bit as independent and defiant as this other kid, except that we're not constantly butting heads because I'm not trying to control him anymore. And so I really let him be the leader in his own life, and our relationship is great.
Mm. Was there that's so when you were saying that, it seriously was like that that was me in my mom's relationship. And I
Apologize
think
to
that
your
I
mom.
did. Oh yeah, like
Okay,
I
good.
I for real, especially as you become a parent, you know how it is. You're like, "Oh
Yep.
my gosh, I was the worst." And then of course you're getting payback. Like I start to see it with my kids and I'm like, "Yep, that's my
Yep.
payback." But I'm curious though, so like with your son, at what was there a point where, like you said, that you're just like, hey, do I need to do surveillance? What do I need to do? Was there like a defining moment that it clicked, I guess, for him as well as you, and then it turned the relationship around? Like, I'm just curious if there was a
So
moment.
yeah, I just did a podcast episode with him not very long ago where I interviewed him because I tell
Fun.
stories about him all the time, which he's super open and doesn't mind me
Yeah.
sharing all of his personal details. And so I talk about him a lot with my clients and
Hmm.
on my podcast. And so I invited him on my podcast to kind of tell his side of the story. And I was asking him that. He's like, I remember the day you started treating me with respect. And I was like,
Hmm.
I thought that I always treated with him. I thought he was disrespecting me. He thought I was disrespecting him. But I know the moment he's talking about, and it's the moment that I thought I was giving up.
Hmm.
And he saw that as the moment I started treating him with respect. And it was when I had actually been praying because I had realized I can't control him. And I'd been praying like, okay, Heavenly Father, you have to help me know what to do with this kid. And the answer I got was hold him close. I took that to mean like work on the relationship. I'm like, how do I hold him close when he doesn't want to be in the same room with me? Like he's sneaking out at night. I can't hold him close. What does that even mean? Right after that, he was in a longboarding accident where he broke both of his wrists and knocked out his front tooth. Well, broke it in half. And so
Hmm.
he was totally dependent on me to take him to the doctors. And we had all this time where we were driving to doctor's appointments. We were sitting
Hmm.
in the doctor's office and we just started talking. And at this point, I had like, quote unquote, given up, I'm not going to control him anymore.
Hmm.
So, oh well, I guess I'll just hang out with him. And and to him, that was the moment when I started treating him with respect, and our relationship became more of me being like a guide and a mentor instead of being in charge.
Man, that's so interesting. Because I feel like that never goes away, even as a business owner. You're dealing with adults, obviously, and you're dealing with that situation where if you're always in a position of having to tell them, "Hey, now you have to do this, now you have to do this," it will drive you crazy. It will drive them crazy. You're not going to grow. You hired
Right.
them because you trusted them to do things a certain way, and yet you try and micromanage, and it will never work. Like you will both be miserable, and it will end very poorly. And
Yeah.
but it's hard because you like want to control, and that I don't know if that ever goes away. I don't know why we have that in us, but
It's so
it
funny
is.
because all of us resist when somebody else tries to control us. And yet we all want to manage the other people, how they behave, and in a way control other people. It's just funny how the human brain works.
Yeah. Like, yeah. I really feel like, yeah, I mean, of all the things that we've been given, like, when we were born on this earth, it was like the number one thing was like agency, like the ability to choose and do what we want to do, like good or bad, doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
that is like fundamentally like the number one thing that is like at our core. Like nothing is more crucial. That's why, you know, prison and solitary confinement and those things are like the worst thing that could happen to a human, because yeah, like
It's to take away their
we
freedom.
lost, yeah, it's like, what's the point, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like it's so interesting that you came to that realization or stumbled on it where you're like, hey, it just turned out I thought I was giving up. And yet,
Yeah.
you know, he took that as like, she's finally loosening up and letting me be like
Yeah.
who I want to be.
And I just have to
That's
say, in his defense, like he's the greatest. He's 23 now, and we have the best relationship. He's so fun. He is a super high achiever. Like he was not such a high achiever in school. That wasn't his thing. Barely graduated, but he started his own business last year and is totally killing it. And he's just so inspiring to me. He just goes after what he wants. His independence, that drive to be who he wanted to be, is taking him far.
so what type of business?
He started a window washing business, but it's like a pest control sales model, like door-to-door sales model business. And
Mm-hmm.
so last year they had like 15 guys working for him for the summer, and this year they have 140. Like it's really growing like crazy, and I'm just so proud of him. It's so fun for me to watch him do his thing and just think big and go take the world by storm.
Man, I got to meet this kid. He
He's
really does
amazing.
remind me a
Yeah.
lot of me.
Yeah,
That's
you should.
such a funny thing. Yeah, and that's the other thing too is yeah, I guess you just never know like how successful they're going to be, especially like high school. And I don't know. I promise you, if anyone would have asked like of all your kids, like who's going to struggle forever, you know, with life.
Yeah.
If you asked that question when I was like in middle school, no doubt that would have been me. You know, all the hands would have, including mine. I'd be like, yeah, it's going to be rough.
Yeah.
But it's just funny because I really think it was actually just like I hated school because I didn't allow me to be free. And like when I could choose what I wanted to study, then it's
Yeah.
totally different. Then
Yeah.
college was awesome because I got to choose, you know, and
Yeah.
I loved learning all of a sudden. It
Well,
was
this kid will not go to college. Like he's not interested at all in college, but he will sneak into college lectures that interest him. And he loves them.
that is so awesome. What a good kid. I
He's
like
a
him.
great, yeah, he's so much fun.
Okay, so I'm curious, do you do like personality tests? Are you into the personality assessments?
I usually do them and then I can't remember very well what I was.
Yeah.
So which
Yeah.
one are you thinking?
Well, so like the predictive index, for example, is something that we'll use in our business just to kind of see like what type of personality. Like we don't hire based on it, but we do
Mm-hmm.
use it as a tool kind of a thing. And so I'm curious, do you use that at all, like any type of assessments or whatever when you're meeting with your clients, or is it just like, let's see where this goes, or how does that
No, I
work?
don't. I have like a little questionnaire that they fill out at the very beginning, like to try and get an idea of what their highest priorities are and what they feel like their biggest worries are and troubles are. I have a tool that I feel like works for everyone in every situation, and so we spend a lot of time like that's where we start
Hmm.
with using this mindset tool. So,
Tell me a little
it
bit more
applies
about
to everyone.
that. I'm curious.
So it's just Brooke Castillo is the owner of the Life Coach School. And this is a truth that you will hear in many forms, in many different places. The way she organized it makes a lot of sense to me in my brain. She calls it the
Mhm.
self-coaching model. And basically it's a little bit like CBT, like the cognitive behavioral therapy model. But
Mm,
it's like you have a circumstance which you don't always get to control, like something that
mm,
just happens out there in the world. And then you have a thought about it, which you do get to choose. Your thoughts create your feelings drive your actions, and your consistent actions create your results. So I can write this out on a piece of paper, and it looks almost like a math problem where you plug this in here and you plug this in here, and you're going to spit out this result every time.
mm.
And so it just is a really easy way for people to understand, oh, this is why I'm feeling this way. This is why I'm getting this result. This is why I'm acting this way. Because sometimes we're acting in a way that we're like, why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
It helps everyone to get clear on why they're doing what they're doing and what they want to do different.
Okay. I love that. Question, depression.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have a lot of clients that come to you that are, I guess you would, I don't know how people are classified as like depressed or whatever, but like, I'm curious because there's so many different methods. So there, in my family, there's, depression runs in our family. So there's, different people that are affected by different things or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's something that I still have yet to kind of wrap my, I don't know, arms around it, because it's just such a difficult thing to figure out with our brain. What are your thoughts on like if someone comes to you and they say, look, I'm pretty depressed and it's pretty regular and common. Like, I know that there's almost like the psychiatrist approach where it's like, well, maybe you should take medication and those kind of things. I'm just curious, like, what your thoughts are on that. I know that's kind of a loaded and broad
Well, I
question,
don't
but
mind talking about that at all because I actually have some kids that have struggled. I have one that's diagnosed with bipolar disorder and one that's been
okay.
diagnosed with depression, with major depressive disorder and anxiety.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we've dealt with this and I've thought about it and talked about it and studied about it a lot. And I
Hmm.
think you're right. There's so many things that play into it. My one son, who's 21, has probably had the worst bout with depression. It hit him when he was about 17, just out of the blue, because he was like super happy, active, high functioning kid. And then all of a sudden, like it knocked his feet out from under him. So there was something chemical or something hormonal or something, some sort of toxin in his body or something that was causing a physical change for him
Hmm.
in the way his brain worked. I don't know what that was. And I think even the doctors, they're doing their best to guess and figure it out. But so I think there's lots of different parts. And what I always tell people when they come to me and they say that whether they're diagnosed by a doctor or just self-diagnosed that they have depression, I say, okay, there are some physiological things that contribute to depression, and I can't help you with those,
Hmm.
but I can very much help you with the way you think. And so I think any tools that are available, if you need medication, great. There was a time where my son was on medication, and I think that kept him alive at the time.
Hmm.
Right now, he's not. He's learned other tools to help manage it that feel better to him. So I think this mindset work is a really important part of it. I don't think it's
Hmm.
the whole solution.
That's a great answer. Yeah, that's so interesting. And yeah, I didn't realize that with your kids. That's it's such a scary thing, Like, I don't
Yeah.
know, because I still feel like no one has a clue
Mm-mm.
kind of what to do in that situation. And so yeah, that's interesting that he took medication. Now, what about your other child that was diagnosed bipolar? Is it
So that's
same?
my oldest daughter. She was about the same age really when it hit her in high school, but she was not nearly as she wouldn't talk to me about it as much. She like tried to fake it till she made it type of a thing. And so I
Mm,
knew she struggled a little bit, but it didn't seem as serious. And then she went away to college and I didn't know how bad it was until she had kind of pulled herself out of it and then she told me how bad it had been.
mm,
So I wasn't much help during that time in her life. And then when she started having babies, she's got all kinds of health problems. She's got a couple of autoimmune diseases. Her health is the worst in
mm.
general. And when she started
Yeah.
having babies, she had after her second, she had like a postpartum kind of a psychosis episode, like where she was hallucinating and like we'd be sitting there together on the couch and she's like, Mom, did somebody just walk through the room? And I was like, no. And she's like, that's what I thought. I didn't think that was real. She's she's incredibly self-aware.
Hmm.
And so she knew what was happening to her, but at the same time she's like, there's something going wrong with my brain because it's giving me information that's false. So she went to therapy, she went to the psychiatrist, and they diagnosed her with bipolar disorder. But she manages it just incredibly well.
Mm.
So
Wow. And she managed it through a lot of, like, I guess, like your training, like where
mhm,
she just kind of learns to deal with it
a
and
lot of that.
mental.
She's also found that her diet makes a huge difference. She doesn't if she doesn't eat gluten, she does. It's way easier for her to control her mind. She's
So
figured this
interesting.
stuff out through trial and error. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what people have to do. It's such a difficult thing. I feel bad for people that are struggling with it and going through it. And
yeah,
it's one of those things where it could hit any of us at any point in time. And
yeah,
I've heard those stories where it's like, no, it's not something that's fake. Like when it hits, it's real. And it's just hard to, yeah, figure out. So no, that's really interesting. What are, I guess, like some common things that, like, experiences that where you're like, okay, people come to me and I'm starting to realize patterns that are starting to just happen over and over again. And maybe this doesn't happen. Maybe everyone's super unique and different, but I'm
Nope.
curious, like, does it, like, pretty much everyone just falls into this? Like, you're like, oh, I know where you're at in the journey, and
Yeah.
this is where you need to course correct. How does that look for you?
Yeah. So how that worked for me was when I first started coaching, I was doing this, I was starting to say, well, oh, wait, I just talked about this. The last 3 people I've coached, we talked about the same thing. And so I put together a curriculum, and it's like a 12-week sequence where I had these little instructional videos, like, okay, first this tool this day, and then next week we talk about this, and then next week, because there's a pretty normal progression of things that most parents need to work on, most parents are struggling with. And so it's broken up into like 4 major units. The first one is called emotional adulthood, and that's the one where we learn that we are free to choose what we think and how we feel, and we really practice doing that for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's about not getting triggered by your kid's behavior, not getting sucked into the drama, not thinking you're a failure when your kid makes a choice that you don't like, right? All of that falls into that kind of first category. And I did that first because it's the foundation for everything, and also because we have to keep practicing it throughout the whole time we work together, because it's not the kind of thing that you can just learn and then you're done learning it. It's like lifetime process. So there's that. The second unit is called staying in your own lane, which is when we learn what I had to learn, how to separate, okay, what is my job? What is my child's job? And what do I just like give up and turn over to Jesus, right? So we have to get clear on all of that. The third unit is about connection and communication, because really, before you're going to have any kind of influence in the life of a teenager or a young adult, it has to be invited. The only way you will get through to them is if you have a relationship. And so we work on relationship building. And then the fourth one is unconditional love and agency, and how to be at peace and to love your child even if they choose something completely different from what you thought they would choose or hoped they would choose. So it's kind of our progression.
Yeah, that's so cool that, yeah, everyone starts to kind of like have a pattern to their behavior and you start to pick up on it. Is there one of those phases that is the most difficult phase to, I guess, turn the corner on?
It's always, well, I can't say always, but it's usually taking things personally, or like getting, you know the term getting triggered. People get triggered by their kids' behaviors. And so learning to stay in charge of your own emotions, I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. One other question related to that. So, like, is there something that you recommend that's kind of like it's this works for any parent, typically, where it's like, okay, the minute that you start feeling like you're a failure, or that, like, you're a reflection of your kids, I guess, more or less, like, is there something or tips that you can offer for parents that are going through that, where they're like, because I feel like so many times, good or bad, like, I've seen this both ways, where, like, look at all my kids and how accomplished they are, I'm so good,
I must be
or
great.
vice versa. Exactly. So, like, how do they avoid, tying themselves, I guess, to their kids and their behavior, I guess? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a good answer to your question or not, but I'll say it anyway because it's what came to mind. So one of the very first things we learned is how to observe your thinking, and how to not just automatically believe every thought that your brain offers you. And so I kind of have this image in my mind. I have a couple different ways of thinking of it. Like, one is I just dump out my purse. You can just dump out your purse and, like, everything's on the table and you sort through it and you're like, okay, I like this. I'm glad this is here. I'm putting this back. This is trash. I found a roll of nickels that I've been carrying around in my purse for who knows how long. Like, there's stuff we just don't need. Our brains are kind of the same way. And so the very first basic skill we have to have is to learn to observe our own thinking and learn which things are useful and which ones are not, and then learn how to let go of the ones that are not. And I think once we learn how to do this, once we learn that thoughts are just thoughts, your brain is going to offer you all kinds of nonsense. Some of it is just ridiculous and not true at all. Some of it is maybe true but not super helpful. And some of it is really helpful. And so we want to develop that skill of observing how we think, and deciding which thoughts I want to nurture and which ones I want to dismiss. And so
Yeah.
when we tie ourselves to our kids' behavior, I think if we can really dump it out on the table and sort through it and look at it honestly, we realize it's not helping them. It's not helping me. There's no point to it. Like there's something programmed in us that thinks that that's helpful. But when we
Mm.
really look at it, it's not.
That's such a good answer. And then do you affirmations? What are your thoughts on those?
So I always have people, a simple way of explaining it, and this is the way I teach it to my kids, is that your thoughts or your beliefs are kind of like hats, where you can try one on, and if it feels good and you like it, you keep it. If it's too tight or if it's itchy or whatever, you just take it off and think something else, right? But
Mm.
keep on trying on hats until you find the one that feels good. So thoughts are kind of like that. You can try on a thought, and I'm just trying to think of an example. Let's say I try on the thought, it's my job to make sure my kids aren't fighting with each other,
Mm.
right? If I'm wearing that hat, if I'm believing that and thinking that, and my kids are fighting with each other, it's going to feel really terrible because it's going to feel like a failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I can just choose to take that off. So, as far as affirmations go, if you try on a thought like, I am rich and successful, you try it on, it doesn't resonate at all. If you feel like a fraud, then what's the point, right? It's not going to
Mm-hmm.
create good results for you. So what I tell my clients is not, don't just pick random affirmations. You have to pick something that is true, that also feels good, that also creates the kind of behavior and results that you want. So sometimes we have to work up to, like, say we're working with body image issues. If you look in the mirror and what you're currently thinking is, I'm fat and ugly,
Mm-hmm.
it's if you just decide to start telling yourself every day, I'm thin and beautiful, you may not really believe it. It's going to feel gross and it's not going to feel true. And I don't think it's going to do you that much good.
Mm.
So instead, maybe we want to start with something like, hey, I'm grateful for this body that works for me, right? And maybe work
Mm.
our way up to something like, I love my body.
That
So,
okay. I see why my wife likes working with you so much. Yeah, if I got to have this every hour, well, I guess once a week or once a month, whatever
yeah.
it ended up being, I think everyone could benefit from, yeah, taking time, because I guess something that I've noticed in my life with my thoughts specifically is like when I'm running a business and I'm so focused on the next thing and what else do I need to do, my to-do list and all these things. Like I
Mhm.
just think it's interesting that I feel like time it's been such a long time or whatever. And I don't know if this is making sense, but like, because I'm just so focused on like constantly improving and it's never good enough. I'm never doing the right thing. Like I could always be better. I could always do this. And so it's
Yeah.
like this constant battle in my head of like, man, I gotta get better. I have to get better. And then when I look at the time frame, I thought it had been like several years, and it's like, no, it's only been like 3 or 4 months. Like it's not, you're not going to get to that like end goal in 3 months. Like give
Yeah.
yourself a little bit of grace, but
Okay,
it's
so but
so
notice
interesting.
this, because
Yeah.
our human brains are programmed to do that, to think like it's going to make me get there faster if I stress out, if I hyper
Yes.
focus on all the problems, right? It feels
Yes.
like that's going to be the most productive.
Hmm.
And yet notice when you tell yourself it's never enough, like if you
Hmm.
try on that hat, you feel gross.
Hmm.
And so then it's not super motivating to love your life or to even keep doing the thing you're doing because it feels like you're
Yeah.
always failing, right? If you just tell yourself, I'm actually doing great, I'm right on track.
Yeah.
If you try that one on, then you feel motivated to do better.
Yeah. See, and I totally agree with that. Like I started doing, there was a book I read called Traction, and it was a book that like explained like you need to set rocks, see those rocks, pebbles, sand, what's the most important thing. And then I read the one thing, and then it was like it clicked where it was like, okay, if I get one thing done today, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like it'll make everything else easier in the future. What is that one domino? So I started looking at it that way. And then it's interesting when I have these rocks for the quarter and I actually look at my rocks, I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually hit every one of them. But in the day to day of the hustle and bustle, I feel like I'm behind. There's so many things I got to get done, and it's never enough. There's never enough time in the day. But then, yeah, you stop and you pause and you're like, oh, like this is actually like, and it's funny because we're hitting our revenue goals, we're hitting all those things. But when you don't stop to look at those rocks, all of
Yeah.
a sudden it's like, I don't know. The
Yeah.
world is moving so fast. I don't know. It's
And you can just
interesting.
miss it. The funny
Yes.
thing about the human brain is that it doesn't, like, there's never a finish line, right? It constantly moves the finish line. So you think, oh, if I can
Yes.
just get to this point, I'm going to feel good.
Hmm.
But then as soon as you start approaching that point, your brain will move the finish line to, no, no, if I just get to this point, then I will feel good. It just takes some real intentionality to decide, oh no, this is, like you put it, this is my rock. And when
Hmm.
this is in place, when I hit this, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when we were younger, we are like, man, if we had $100,000, like
Oh
we
yeah,
would be
that
done.
would
We're
go
living in
forever.
Hawaii. We are living life, And then, yeah, you get 100 and you're like, yeah, that's like a tenth of what I need. And then it's like, you get them. And then it's just up to your point. It's
Yeah.
never enough. Like your brain is always like, yeah, you need more. So I love that you're like, hey, pause at least once a week or month, whatever it is for that person.
Yeah. Set some time.
Meet with, yeah, and like sit with your thoughts a little bit. And I think it does help. Like talk to anyone, ideally a life coach that kind of knows how to steer the conversation, but it really does help. Like I started doing coaching the last couple of years, and it's
Yeah.
like I found myself even this morning. I had a coaching call, and I walked through the entire process of like, what would he tell me? And I'm like, oh, he'd probably say this. And then like I worked through the whole thing, and he's like, you just did my job for you. Like that was cool. And I was
Yeah.
like, you're right. I just like went through like, yeah, I can't do this because of this. And then
And
anyways, it was
that's
fun.
really the goal. But I found myself doing the same thing. We took our family on vacation last week. We were in Hawaii, and there's 14 of
Awesome.
us. Managing a group that size is just kind of a lot. And so there were
Hmm.
several times when I would find myself starting to stress, and I would hear my own life coach's voice in my head asking me these certain questions. Okay, now why is this a problem? And I just was able to totally talk myself down from stressing and enjoy my vacation.
I love that. Man, this has been fun.
Yeah.
Okay. So I ask everyone a couple questions at the end of the podcast. And so the first one, it might be hard for you because I'm sure you read a lot, and I'm sure you're constantly listening to podcasts and those kind of things. But is there a specific book or podcast that you've been listening to recently that's made a big impact?
I just read Essentialism, which I
Mm,
loved,
I
by
have heard several
Greg
people say I need to read
McCown.
that. Okay.
That was really good. As far as parenting books, I have one that I recommend to a lot of my clients. It's called Parenting Without Power Struggles
Mm,
by Susan Stiffelman.
okay.
And I just really love that one.
Awesome.
So I'd
Cool.
recommend that.
Perfect. Yeah. And I need to read. In fact, I have Essentialism, but I have not opened it up. So I need to.
Yeah, I
Love
just
that.
listened to it on Audible, and the author reads it in his cool British accent. So that was kind of fun too. It's a good one to listen to.
Nice. Good. That's good to know. You're right. Because if it's not a good reader,
Yeah.
then I won't listen to it.
Yep.
But okay, cool. Yeah. The other question is, okay, so if you were to be able to go back to your very first child, like right before you had your first child, what is some advice that you would give yourself now that you've learned so many life lessons throughout that period? What is like one or two pieces of advice that you give yourself?
So I have things I'd probably tell myself, but I don't know that hearing it from myself would make me get there any faster.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just kind of lessons that things you don't get until you've been through them. But
Believe
I
it.
think I think one of the things I would say was parenting is not so much about telling everybody what to do as it is about enjoying who they are, like enjoying the relationship and just watching them become who they're going to become. And I
Mm,
don't mean to imply that I'm not at all a hands-off parent. I'm all about being very intentional in parenting, but being intentional doesn't mean me being in charge
mm.
like I used to think it did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Man, they come
they come with
prepackaged.
their personalities.
There is no doubt.
Yep.
Oh
So
man,
yeah,
that's
just I guess
awesome.
relax and enjoy it more. Enjoy the relationship more.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do wish that that's something that I don't know what it is with growing up where we lose the ability to have fun and
Mhm.
just laugh and like we watch our twins and it's like the most enjoyable thing ever because they're
Yep.
so funny. I mean, they're so crazy, they're so fun, but
I think
yeah, they
babies are
just live life.
the best unifiers for families. Like I'm so glad we've
Yeah.
always had babies in some stage in our family, because it kind of brings everybody together and reminds everybody to be silly and have fun.
It's so funny you say that, because I seriously, I was telling Alexis the other day, I'm like, when have we not had toddlers in our house? I swear there's people that like, you'll miss it because it goes so fast.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not going fast. We have toddlers still, and I swear my entire married life I've had a toddler. So I don't know. It's just so fun, but it's
but still,
point,
like in a
young.
few years, you won't, and you'll be like, man, that went fast.
Really?
You will, I promise.
I keep hearing this, and so okay, I'll let you know if that does happen. But we're still in the thick of it. But we love it. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
It's good. It's fulfilling. Well, thanks so much, Christi, for coming on. This seriously was such a pleasure. Knew it was going to be a blast having
so
you
fun
on.
to talk to you.
Yeah, it really was. And this is something that I don't get to talk about often, which is why I was like, you know what? I need to get more females on the show, because they have, I seriously, like, I think if I could, and I've told my team this, I don't think they'll take offense to it, but I've always said, like, if I could just hire a bunch of moms, like, I'm telling you, my business would flourish. It's
Moms
just hard
can get
finding.
stuff done.
They can, like, more than anyone, and they don't complain. They don't have sick days. They don't have a choice. They're just always not sick.
Yep.
They're just tough. And so, anyways, I have so much respect for women and what they do, and moms and all that fun stuff. So, anyways, thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to this podcast. It's the best part of my week. I love learning from others' failures, and let's be honest, failures are way more enjoyable when you're not the one experiencing them in the moment. If you or someone you know has a story or experience to share, we would love to have you on the show. And please do not forget to like and share this podcast with anyone you feel would get value from the experiences shared on this show. Until the next show, remember to fail fast and fail often. Thanks for listening to the Rush to Fail podcast.